Maria Santos grew up in a small military town in Texas where everyone knew everyone else's business. Her father was a decorated Army veteran who had served 3 tours in Afghanistan. Her mother worked as a nurse at the local veterans hospital. Her older brother Carlos had followed in their father's footsteps and was now a sergeant in the Marines. Even her younger sister Anna was planning to join the Air Force after high school. Maria was supposed to be next. From the time she could walk, her relatives would pat her head and say, "This one's going to be our little warrior." Her grandfather, a Vietnam veteran, would tell stories about brave women in combat and point to Maria. "You're going to make us all proud," he would say with a smile that crinkled his weathered face. But Maria had different dreams. While her siblings played war games in the backyard, she sat inside reading books about science and medicine. While they talked about military strategy, she wondered about curing diseases and helping sick people. When career day came at school, other kids in military families talked about joining the armed forces. Maria quietly wrote down, "Doctor," on her career interest form. The trouble started when Maria turned 18. The family gathered for her graduation party, and everyone expected her to announce her military plans. Instead, she stood up nervously and told them she had been accepted to study pre-medicine at the local university on a scholarship. The silence in the room was deafening. Her father's face turned red with embarrassment. Her uncle Roberto, who had lost his leg in Iraq, shook his head in disappointment. "What kind of Santos doesn't serve their country?" he muttered loud enough for everyone to hear. Her cousin Diego laughed bitterly. "So you're going to hide behind books while real men and women fight for freedom? That's not the Santos way." The words stung more than Maria had expected. She had always looked up to Diego, who was a Navy SEAL. Her grandmother, who had lost 2 sons in Vietnam, pulled Maria aside. "Mija," she said sadly, "your family has bled for this country for generations. What you're doing, it's selfish. You're breaking a tradition that means everything to us." The criticism didn't stop there. At family gatherings, Maria became the topic of whispered conversations. Relatives would ask pointed questions about her studies, making it clear they thought she was wasting her time. When Diego came home on leave, he would make jokes about Maria being the college girl who thought she was too good for military service. The worst moment came during Christmas dinner when Maria was in her 2nd year of college. Her great-uncle Fernando, a Korean War veteran, had been drinking and decided to share his feelings. He stood up during dinner and pointed at Maria. "Look at her," he said to the whole table. 4 generations of Santos warriors, and we get stuck with a failed warrior who thinks books are more important than bullets." The room erupted in uncomfortable laughter and murmurs of agreement. Maria felt tears burning her eyes, but she refused to cry in front of them. She excused herself from the table and spent the rest of the evening in her childhood bedroom, questioning whether she was making the right choice. Her parents were caught in the middle. They loved Maria but felt the pressure from the extended family. Her father would make comments about how he didn't understand why she couldn't serve her country like everyone else. Her mother would sigh and say, "I just want you to be happy. But I wish you would consider what the family thinks." The isolation grew worse as Maria progressed through college. She threw herself into her studies, earning top grades in chemistry and biology. She volunteered at the local hospital, shadowing doctors and learning about patient care. She found purpose in helping elderly veterans who came in for treatment, listening to their stories and making sure they felt comfortable. But even at the hospital, her family's military background followed her. When other volunteers learned about her family's service record, they would ask why she hadn't enlisted. Some seemed to respect her choice, but others clearly thought less of her for not following the family tradition. Maria began to doubt herself. Maybe her relatives were right. Maybe she was being selfish. Maybe she was dishonoring her family's legacy of service. She would lie awake at night wondering if she should drop out of college and join the military like everyone expected. The breaking point came during her junior year when Diego was deployed overseas. The family gathered to send care packages, and Maria helped pack supplies. As they worked, her Aunt Carmen started crying. "At least Diego is serving his country with honor," she said between sobs. Not like some people who think they're too good to fight for freedom. Everyone knew the comment was directed at Maria. She felt the familiar shame wash over her, but this time something else stirred inside her. She realized that helping people as a doctor could be just as important as serving in the military. She thought about all the veterans she had comforted at the hospital, all the sick children she hoped to help someday, all the medical research that could save lives. That night, Maria made a decision. She would continue her path toward medical school. No matter what her family thought, she would prove that there were many ways to serve others and make a difference in the world. She didn't know it yet, but her determination would eventually lead her down a path that would make her family's criticism seem very small indeed. The girl they called a failed warrior was about to begin a journey that would take her places none of them could have imagined. Maria graduated from college with highest honors and was accepted into medical school at a prestigious university 3 states away. For the first time in years, she felt free from the constant judgment of her relatives. She could focus on her studies without hearing whispers about being a failed warrior at every family gathering. Medical school was challenging but rewarding. Maria excelled in her classes and discovered a passion for infectious diseases and public health. She was particularly interested in tropical diseases that affected people in developing countries. Her professors noticed her dedication and encouraged her to consider specialized training in global health medicine. During her 3rd year of medical school, Maria participated in a medical mission to Honduras. She worked in rural clinics where people had limited access to health care. She saw children suffering from diseases that could be easily prevented or treated with proper medical care. She witnessed the impact that dedicated medical professionals could have on entire communities. The experience changed something fundamental in Maria. She realized that medicine wasn't just about treating individual patients in comfortable hospitals. It was about serving people who had nowhere else to turn, who desperately needed help, who couldn't afford expensive treatments. She felt a calling to work in the most challenging places where medical care was needed most. When she returned from Honduras, Maria applied for a residency in emergency medicine. She wanted to be on the front lines of healthcare, helping people in their most desperate moments. Her residency was at a busy urban hospital that served a diverse population, including many immigrants and people without insurance. The work was exhausting but fulfilling. Maria worked 18-hour shifts, treating everything from heart attacks to gunshot wounds to complicated pregnancies. She learned to make life or death decisions under pressure. She discovered that she thrived in crisis situations, staying calm when chaos erupted around her. During her residency, Maria heard about a program called Doctors Without Borders. The organization sent medical professionals to conflict zones and disaster areas around the world. They worked in refugee camps, war zones, and areas affected by natural disasters. The work was dangerous, but it meant providing medical care to people who desperately needed it. Maria knew immediately that this was what she wanted to do with her life. She completed her residency and applied to join Doctors Without Borders. The application process was rigorous, requiring extensive medical training, psychological evaluation, and preparation for working in dangerous conditions. Meanwhile, her relationship with her family remained strained. At her medical school graduation, her relatives attended, but seemed uncomfortable celebrating her achievement. Her uncle Roberto made comments about how all that education was a waste if she wasn't going to serve her country. Her cousin Diego, now back from deployment, continued to make jokes about Maria choosing an easy path instead of real service. Maria tried to explain her work to them, describing the patients she had saved and the communities she had served during her medical missions. But they couldn't understand how treating sick people could compare to military service. To them, real service meant carrying a weapon and fighting enemies, not carrying a stethoscope and fighting diseases. The tension came to a head during Thanksgiving dinner when Maria announced her acceptance into Doctors Without Borders. She explained that she would be deployed to South Sudan, where civil war had created a humanitarian crisis. Millions of people needed medical care, and she would be working in a refugee camp providing emergency treatment. Her family's reaction was worse than she had expected. Her father was furious that she would put herself in danger for strangers instead of serving her own country. Her grandmother cried, saying that Maria was throwing her life away. Her uncle Fernando, now in his 80s, stood up and declared that Maria had disgraced the family name. 4 generations of Santos warriors, he said, his voice shaking with emotion. And you want to waste your life playing doctor in some foreign country? You're not serving anyone. You're just running away from your responsibilities. The words cut deep, but Maria stood her ground. She explained that she would be providing medical care to war refugees, including women and children who had fled violence. She described the surgical procedures she would perform, the lives she could save, the suffering she could alleviate. But her family couldn't see past their own definition of service. To them, Maria was still the failed warrior, who had chosen an easy path instead of the honorable tradition of military service. They couldn't understand that she was preparing to enter a different kind of war zone, one where she would fight against disease and death instead of human enemies. Maria left for South Sudan with a heavy heart. She loved her family despite their criticism, and their disapproval hurt more than she wanted to admit. But she also knew that she was following the right path for her life. She had found a way to serve that matched her skills and passions. The refugee camp in South Sudan was unlike anything Maria had experienced. Thousands of people lived in temporary shelters, having fled violence in their home communities. Many had walked for days or weeks to reach the camp, carrying only what they could manage. Children arrived malnourished and sick. Adults had untreated wounds from the conflict. Maria worked in a field hospital with limited resources and constant challenges. She performed surgeries using basic equipment under difficult conditions. She treated infectious diseases that were spreading through the overcrowded camp. She delivered babies and watched children take their first breaths in a world torn apart by war. The work was exhausting and heartbreaking, but also incredibly rewarding. Every life saved felt like a victory against the forces of violence and hatred that had created the refugee crisis. Maria discovered reserves of strength and courage she didn't know she possessed. She also realized that her work was more dangerous than her family had understood. The region was unstable, with armed groups operating near the refugee camp. Medical facilities were sometimes targeted by fighters who saw international aid workers as enemies. Maria and her colleagues had to evacuate several times when violence came too close to their location. But instead of feeling afraid, Maria felt more committed than ever to her mission. These people had no one else to help them. If she and her colleagues left, who would treat the sick children? Who would help women give birth safely? Who would stand between vulnerable people and preventable death? As months passed, Maria's work began to attract attention from international media and health organizations. Reporters wrote stories about the young American doctor who had left a comfortable life to serve in one of the world's most dangerous places. Medical journals published her research on treating infectious diseases in refugee populations. Maria didn't know it yet, but her growing reputation would soon catch the attention of people in very high places. The failed warrior was about to become a recognized hero in ways her family had never imagined possible. After 18 months in South Sudan, Maria was reassigned to Syria, where another humanitarian crisis was unfolding. The civil war had created millions of refugees and displaced persons who needed medical care. Maria found herself working in even more dangerous conditions, treating victims of chemical weapons attacks and providing surgery in underground hospitals. The work in Syria was particularly challenging because medical facilities were being deliberately targeted by military forces. Maria and her colleagues had to work in hidden locations, often moving their equipment and patients when intelligence suggested an attack was coming. She learned to perform emergency surgery by flashlight and to treat mass casualty events with limited supplies. During one particularly intense period, Maria worked for 72 hours straight, treating victims of a bombing that had hit a marketplace. She saved the lives of dozens of people, including several children who arrived with severe injuries. Her quick thinking and medical expertise prevented a tragedy from becoming even worse. A journalist who was covering the humanitarian crisis witnessed Maria's work during that emergency. He wrote a detailed article about the young American doctor who was risking her life to save Syrian civilians. The article was picked up by major news outlets around the world, and suddenly Maria's story was being read by millions of people. The article described how Maria had left a comfortable life in America to work in the world's most dangerous places. It detailed her medical training, her work with Doctors Without Borders, and her commitment to helping people who had no other options for medical care. The journalist called her one of the bravest medical professionals of her generation. The attention made Maria uncomfortable at first. She didn't consider herself particularly brave or heroic. She was just doing her job, treating sick and injured people who needed help. But her colleagues in Doctors Without Borders explained that public recognition was important for their work because it helped raise awareness about humanitarian crises and encourage support for international aid. As Maria's story spread, she began receiving messages from people around the world who were inspired by her work. Medical students wrote to say that her example had motivated them to consider international humanitarian service. Other young people said that her story had shown them that there were many ways to serve others and make a difference in the world. The attention also reached unexpected places. Government officials and international health organizations began taking notice of Maria's work and expertise. She was invited to speak at medical conferences about her experiences treating patients in conflict zones. Her research on managing infectious disease outbreaks in refugee populations was cited by health policy experts. Meanwhile, her family back in Texas was slowly beginning to understand the significance of Maria's work. Her father saw the news articles about her service in Syria and started to realize that his daughter was indeed serving others in a meaningful way. Her mother began telling neighbors about Maria's medical work with pride instead of embarrassment. But it was her cousin Diego who had the biggest change of heart. He was deployed in the Middle East when he heard about Maria's work in Syria from other soldiers. They told him about the American doctor who was saving lives in dangerous conditions, and he realized they were talking about his own cousin. Diego reached out to Maria through email, apologizing for years of criticism and acknowledging that he had been wrong about her choices. He told her that the soldiers he served with respected medical professionals who worked in war zones, understanding that their work was just as important and dangerous as military service. The recognition of Maria's work reached its peak when she was selected for a prestigious international humanitarian award. The ceremony was held in Geneva, and representatives from dozens of countries attended. Maria was honored for her exceptional courage and dedication in providing medical care to the world's most vulnerable populations. But the biggest surprise was yet to come. A few weeks after returning from Geneva, Maria received a phone call that would change everything. An official from the White House was calling to inform her that she had been selected to receive the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the highest civilian honor in the United States. The caller explained that President Biden had learned about Maria's work through the State Department, which had been tracking her humanitarian service. The president had decided that her courage and dedication represented the best of American values and deserved recognition at the highest level. Maria was stunned. She had never imagined that her medical work would be recognized by the President of the United States. The official explained that the ceremony would be held at the White House, and that Maria's family would be invited to attend. When Maria called her parents to share the news, her father broke down crying. He told her that he was proud of her and sorry for not understanding her choice earlier. Her mother was so excited that she immediately started calling relatives to share the news. The transformation in her family was remarkable. Suddenly, everyone wanted to claim credit for supporting Maria's dreams. Relatives who had criticized her for years now bragged about their connection to the young doctor who was receiving the nation's highest civilian honor. Her uncle Roberto, who had been one of her harshest critics, called to apologize. He told Maria that he finally understood that there were many ways to serve one's country and that her medical work was just as important as military service. Her great-uncle Fernando, now in his 80s, admitted that he had been wrong to call her a failed warrior. The day of the White House ceremony arrived, and Maria's entire extended family traveled to Washington, D.C. to attend. They filled several rows in the East Room, wearing their best clothes and carrying American flags. Many of them had never been to the nation's capital before. When President Biden began the ceremony, he spoke about the importance of service and sacrifice in American society. He talked about people who dedicate their lives to helping others, often at great personal cost. Then he called Maria's name. Dr. Maria Santos, the president announced, has embodied the highest ideals of American service through her work, providing medical care in the world's most dangerous places. She has risked her life repeatedly to save others, treating refugees and war victims in Syria, South Sudan, and other conflict zones. Her courage and compassion represent the best of what America can contribute to the world. As Maria walked to the front of the room to receive her medal, she could see her family in the audience. Her father was crying openly, his chest puffed with pride. Her mother was taking pictures with shaking hands. Her cousin Diego was standing at attention in his military uniform, saluting as she passed. The president placed the medal around Maria's neck and shook her hand. "Thank you for your service," he said quietly. "You make us all proud." After the ceremony, Maria's family gathered around her, everyone wanting to touch the medal and take pictures. Her great-uncle Fernando, the man who had once called her a failed warrior, pulled her aside with tears in his eyes. "Mija," he said, his voice cracking with emotion, "I was wrong about you. You're not a failed warrior. You're the best kind of warrior there is. You fight against suffering and death. You save lives instead of taking them. I'm sorry. It took me so long to understand." As Maria looked around at her family, all of them beaming with pride and love, she realized that her journey had come full circle. The girl they had once criticized for not following the family tradition of military service had found her own way to serve. She had proven that courage comes in many forms and that there are many ways to fight for what's right. The failed warrior had become a hero, recognized at the highest levels of government. But more importantly, she had stayed true to herself and found a way to make a difference in the world. She had discovered that sometimes the greatest victories are won not with weapons, but with compassion, skill, and an unwavering commitment to helping others. Standing in the White House, surrounded by her family's love and pride, Maria knew that every moment of doubt and criticism had been worth it. She had found her calling, and in doing so, she had honored both her family's tradition of service and her own values. The journey from family disappointment to presidential recognition had taught everyone involved that heroism takes many forms and that true service comes from the heart.